Welcome, everybody. I'm resizing my screen over here. My name is Vinny Oliveri, and I'm the Associate Dean of Graduate Studies here in the School of the Arts, Claire Trevor School of the Arts at UC Irvine. And I'm excited to welcome you to our third and final CTSA grad student research colloquium in the School of the Arts for the fall 2020. This is a brand new program that we put together just this year, started over the summer. Putting it together, and it's been really terrific to have so many different voices from different parts of the School of the Arts come together and talk about the work that they're doing. I know that I feel super siloed when I'm in my other position as a drama faculty member. I feel siloed, and that I work with the drama students really well, but I don't get to work as much with students and faculty from the other departments. And this is a great way for us to build some connections and to learn what each other is doing. So welcome. I want to introduce our three presenters today, and I'll introduce them in the order in which they are going to present to you. First, from the Department of Dance, Brandye Lee. Hello, Brandye. From Art, Laura Solomon, who is our only person presenting from on campus at UCI today. And then from the Department of Drama, Jesús López Vargas. Hi, Jesús. So a little bit about the structure as we get closer to starting. First thing is that each of the presenters is going to have about 10 or 12 minutes to present. They're going to talk about their work and what they are working on. We're going to go from presenter to presenter with just a little bit of a reintroduction on my by me in between the presenters, and we'll do Q&A at the very end. So if you want to take a look, those of you who are using a desktop or a laptop interface for Zoom, at the bottom of the screen you can see a chat and a Q&A button. The chat button is one that you can use to chat with each other. But if you've got questions that you have for the presenters, I would like to ask you to use the Q&A feature. It lets me monitor those questions, organize them, mark them as answered, things like that. It just helps me stay a little bit more organized. So you can use the chat to cheer for your friends and applaud at the end. But please use the Q&A section for questions. You can ask questions whenever you want to throughout the entire event, but we won't get to them until after Jesús has presented. Okay. The last thing I say before we get started is that we're going to have two of these in the winter. I've already sent out an email to all the grad students in the School of the Arts asking them if they are interested in being one of these presenters to fill out a short Google form. But I want to remind you that if you are a grad student at School of the Arts and you are interested in maybe being part of this, if you can go back and find that email that I sent out, or you can just send me an email directly and I'll point you to the form. We are looking forward to having two of these in the winter. Winter tends to be the time when the students are often, in my experience, students are often the most crazed. And so we're only going to do two of these so that everyone can catch their breath. And then we'll pick it up in the spring as well. Okay. So I'm going to ask Jesús and Laura to please turn off their cameras. And I'm going to introduce Brandye Lee from the Department of Dance, who is going to talk to you about some of her creative work. Brandye, take it away. You are muted, Brandye. Brandye, you're still muted. Okay.
All right. Thank you all so much for joining us here this afternoon. And before I begin my presentation, I'd just like to thank Professor Oliveri for the opportunity to share about my work today. When I received my acceptance letter to the UCI MFA dance program last February, I was hobbling around on crutches, unable to use my left leg after tearing my meniscus in two places during a performance. My doctor initiated the healing process with a platelet-rich plasma, or PRP, injection. The way he explained the treatment to me was, By injecting my knee with my own blood cells, it would signal to my body that I was newly injured, resulting in a rush of new blood cells and, importantly, new meniscus tissue growth in the affected area. At the time, I couldn't walk, let alone dance, so I consider it a modern medicine miracle that 8 months later, I was standing in fifth position at the bar in the Claire Trevor Dance Studios. Also, more tragically, I recently suffered the loss of my Aunt Jackie, my mother's sister. Aunt Jackie was a pillar of the family, and her sudden death on this past Christmas Eve left the entire family in shock. Aunt Jackie tag-teamed with my mother to care for their elderly parents. When Aunt Jackie passed, my Uncle Bobby moved in with my grandparents to assist my mom with their care. This summer, Uncle Bobby and my grandfather were both diagnosed with pancreatic masses. Uncle Bobby has terminal stage 4 pancreatic cancer, while my grandfather was diagnosed with an aggressive form of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Last month, my grandmother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. My mother has suddenly been left holding the reins over all of these affairs, from managing meals, chemotherapy treatments and the awful side effects, and medications, to managing my grandparents' household. This was already a heavy load for my mother. Then, just a few short weeks ago, my mom and I discovered our dear Aunt Loretta lifeless in her bed while delivering her daily dinner. Again, my mother has had to manage an immeasurable amount of turbulence in a very short amount of time. I didn't realize how these two scenarios involving my knee and my family were related until I embarked on a recent journey at the Living Systems Art and Design Collaboratory presented by Design Science Studio at the Buckminster Fuller Institute with Hab Ritual and the Emergent Media Design Lab here at UCI. In a recent talk given by Mansoor Vakili at the Collaboratory, I learned about the Living Systems philosophy, which uses the human body as a metaphor for living systems that are self-sustaining, self-organizing, and self-healing. Furthermore, human beings are part of the universe and the earth, which are both cognitive living systems containing the living structural patterns of nonlinear networks. The Living Systems philosophy encourages us to shift from linear left brain thinking with more masculine qualities to nonlinear right brain thinking with more feminine attributes. For example, in relationships, we move from self-assertive to integrative, from rational to intuitive, from reductionist to holistic, and from separation to connectedness. And in values, we go from consumption to conservation, from competition to cooperation, quantity to quality, domination to partnership, rigidity to flexibility, judgmental to observant, and liability management to asset management. Since the outset of my time at the Collaboratory, I have been researching how, through choreography and design, I can bring together the following ideas set forth by the Collaboratory: that all members of nonlinear networks implement their assets in cooperation and partnership to achieve the long-term goals of the whole network, creating a whole that is greater than the sum of its parts, and the human body as living systems metaphor, looking inwards to understand what's outside. Through the lens of the living systems philosophy, I see my knee injury and healing process as a metaphor of the way my family came together in a crisis. I see my grandparents, uncle, and mother as the meniscus of my knee, and each family member as the rush of fresh blood cells that intelligently and organically organized themselves around the most vulnerable in our midst to support them in a critical time of urgent need. My family, which also includes close friends and dear neighbors, have unselfishly observed what is needed, integrated themselves into a connective web of care, partnered with my mother and me to provide a high quality of life for our loved ones, and they have demonstrated intuitiveness by doing what's needed before they're ever asked. By splitting up responsibilities, my family continues to address the holistic needs of our loved ones while simultaneously conserving vital energy and resources. We have been flexible and cooperative to ensure that no ball has been dropped, including my daily walk with my grandmother. I have seen through each phase a foundation rocking challenge, how my family has become stronger with a whole that is greater than the sum of the parts. My time at the collaboratory will culminate in a dance piece. Although I eventually see it as a work for a theater like our XMPL, the first iteration will be a video production. A dance piece would introduce the audience to a family. A crisis ensues, they overcome, and through the genius of graphic design, when we pull back and take a wider macro view, the audience sees how we've been inside of the injured, healed knee the entire time. Through the choreography and design process, it is my desire to highlight the awesome human body as a living system. Moreover, by embracing nonlinear thinking, individuals can replicate the genius of creation and with our world generate a whole that is greater than the sum of its parts. I hope to empower others to shift to nonlinear thinking, especially during crisis or chaos, when perhaps the inclination to cling to traditional linear thinking is strongest. As indicated by my experience, this crucial shift can be ultimately regenerative and life-sustaining. And I'd just like to give a special thanks to Professor John Crawford, Dr. Lisa Noggle, the MFA Dance Cohort of 21, the UCI Dance Department, and Dr. John Farrell. And here are my sources. And thank you all so much for listening.
Thank you, Brandye. That was a terrific presentation, and I'm moved by the strength and love that's in your family. It just getting me right now. So thank you so much. Our next presenter is from the Department of Art. Laura Solomon, will you please turn your camera on, and you are ready to go.
Okay, thank you so much for that presentation, Brandye. And thank you, Vinny, for the opportunity to talk here today. Before I can talk about what I'm making right now, I need to rant for a moment. I have a specific topic that's the primary driver for my work, even if that topic isn't always directly visible as content in the work. My interest is in the care of the elderly disabled and the facts of caregiving. Most of my interest is actually centered around an even narrower area of institutional elder care, meaning in the nursing home or skilled nursing facility. That is, adults sufficiently disabled as to need incontinence care, colloquially known as diaper care. My position is based as much on direct experience as formal research. That experience has been in observation of management and policy at 4 different skilled nursing facilities, 3 hospitals, interactions with investigators from the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services, and from the Department of Health and Human Services. Any numerical data underlying my attitudes and assertions comes from the federal CMS and DHHS websites, financial data from my own experience as a caregiver, and nonprofit websites that study caregivers in America, both professional and familial, or with other affinities. The truth is that things break down. The human body breaks down, and our culture isn't really willing to acknowledge that. We say things like age is only a number and look to medical and pseudo-medical science for no end of anti-aging strategies. I think we're driven by a fear of our own vulnerability and also driven by a peculiarly insistent ethic that the non-productive do not deserve consideration. If we're not willing to acknowledge that the body eventually breaks down, we continue to fail our most vulnerable citizens, and we continue to inflict needless pain on the already suffering. The truth is, things break down and bodies break down, but our culture insists on this delusion, this self-protective refusal to acknowledge or see the existence of, for instance, the elderly, disabled. In our optimistic culture, resources can be allocated based on a kind of perceived virtue rather than need, like the Victorian idea of the deserving poor. Something in our cultural ethic insists that poor health is a moral failure and that aging is a form of poor health that can be prevented through virtuous behavior, proper diet, exercise, wellness programs that promise anti-aging, even to reverse aging. Somehow into our ethic has crept the idea that aging itself is a moral failure. Something to do with healthy people cost less money, sick people are expensive. Something to do with the idea that what is not productive of profit is immoral. So further down that road, we come to an impressive lack of financial and moral accountability around the way institutions manage incontinence care. Something I've seen consistently in dealing with incontinence care for the elderly disabled at the management level, at the policy level, is an absolutely breathtaking failure of empathy. This astonishing inability to empathize with the physical fact of a human being, like this really flawless inability to relate the human in pain, the human needing care, with one's own humanity. Throughout this rant, I've chosen to say we, because to say they obscures the fact that we don't actually live in a culture of they. A culture is made up of we. So this agenda of mine is directly obvious in only a few of the things that I've made. I'm going to show just a few of them for context. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, I hope that my screen is being shared. This is one piece. This is a collection of perfume strips holding a fragrance that I made myself out of professional perfumers' materials. The name of the fragrance is Acceptable Tolerances for Neglect in Nursing Facility Incontinence Care. It's a nice, pleasant, warm, woody fragrance that leans just a little bit more heavily on the fecal notes that are part of any well-constructed perfume. This large paper structure is the Center for Medicaid Services Long-Term Care Provider Handbook. It's basically the handbook for how to run a nursing home. It's a very large document. I sewed the pages together and hung them from the gallery ceiling. This is sort of old work, by the way. This is from my last show in undergrad. These are slides from a satirical infomercial that I did as voiceover, essentially talking about what is said about long-term care, what is claimed about long-term care, and what you can actually expect if you need long-term care. And for the logo for this imaginary group, I stole the National Rifle Association logo and made some changes to it. And then lastly, this is from my second year show here at UCI. The watercolor drawing there is a drawing that I made from a photograph that I took myself. One of the reasons it's very hard to prove incontinence neglect in a nursing facility, in part because it really doesn't photograph well. This is a photograph that came out clearly, so I made a watercolor from it. In the foreground here is where I set myself up to read a story and sing a hymn. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. For a long time, I've felt trapped by the facts of my topic. I mean, I thought that to do justice to the truth of things, the terrible facts and data around institutional failures and incontinence care, that instead of making some kind of artwork, I would have to start making things that functioned like an infographic. But recently, influenced by the pandemic conditions, I thought, what if I'm barking up the wrong set of assumptions? And I started asking myself more seriously what it is in my topic that distresses me so much, and more uncomfortably, what's the nature of that distress? This is something I hadn't wanted to look at too closely when I first started making an exploration of the idea of performance, storytelling, and singing, of using my voice to basically ask something of the listener. So a few months into the lockdown, while the news was getting sadder and sadder, I was looking for ways to respond with work that didn't require studio space. So I started making little instrumental sketches with sound loops. And it was during this time, in conversation with Kevin Appel in studio art, he said something that really stuck in my head, to the effect that sound or music has the ability to cut directly to emotional affect. So following that conversation, I downloaded GarageBand, and through this slow process of improvisation and layering and editing and looping, using my voice, I made this sort of song. I wanted to sing something that would be soothing and warm, like I wanted to sing a hug, but with a kind of an uneasy thread running through it. So these days, I'm thinking less about what's going to make the most interesting or sophisticated artwork, or the artwork most consistent with my ideals in the context of critical theory. And I'm thinking more about what kind of direct access I can get in provoking emotional response. I mean, you can't force empathy by yelling at people, but maybe to tug on heartstrings in proximity to a specific topic, maybe I could get somewhere with that. So I'm really kind of reaching back into my past: musical theater, classical bel canto, vocal training, singing in a band. I'm reaching back to all of that to find means of vocal manipulation using combinations of words, layering my voice into chords, because chord progressions make and relieve and create again emotional tension. I'm really looking for every kind of emotional hook I can try to throw at this one topic that really obsesses me, in reaction against the values of for-profit institutional care. I mean, no doubt, politics and therefore economics is emotional. We've always known this in the advertising business. People buy on emotion, not data. You win hearts and minds on emotion. This is not to denigrate emotion. I think emotion is where we live. There's potential moral force in emotion. And I think that may be kind of the kernel of what I'm trying to investigate, the motive for my material investigation. And by material, I mean just my voice. So what I'm looking into now is finding what emotional colors and flavors I can put into this, what for me is a strange new practice of singing with myself. My present idea is to build by singing my text in layers and repetitions and harmonies and sections. I'd like to build a sort of multi-part choral work that is centered around or driven by these things I've been saying about elder care, both institutional and familial. I'm interested in the idea of the choral work as a form, its associations with worship and liturgy. So the title of the work may be the only really obvious reference to my subject. It could change, but right now I'm calling it A Beautiful Song About Incontinence Neglect. Could change. I should add that in being an obstacle to the research I had originally intended to do, COVID has possibly forced me to take this useful directional shift, maybe more effective. The statistics and the data and all the backup proof of my case about institutional incontinence neglect that I wanted to expand on, that may not be what should be driving my production right now. So I want to make a choral piece that's as emotionally affecting, as pretty, as absolutely pretty as I can make it. I'm even putting the word beautiful in the title, partly because it's like kind of dark humor, but like also a challenge to myself, that this like absurd hubris, my ambition, wanting to enchant rather than alienate a listener, to like put every bit of inviting warmth I possibly can tied to this idea that this basic human need is worthy of attention, is worthy of compassionate attention. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Laura. What a terrific presentation. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask Jesús and Jesús's AI assistant to please get themselves ready to present. And I'll remind you that if you've got questions for Brandye or Laura, you can go ahead and stick them in the Q&A so you don't lose your train of thought. And after Jesús presents, we'll go back to Q&A that I'll moderate for everybody. So I'm going to introduce to you Jesús López Vargas, and take it away, Jesús.
Hello, and thank you for the talented artists that presented before me. That was great. So hi, my name is Jesús Enrique López Vargas, and today I'm going to be talking about existentialism. Just kidding, but a little bit. So this presentation is going to be a little bit all over the place, just because that's the nature of the projects. But here we are. Anyway, so I'm going to be talking specifically about 2 shows or performances projects that I created over the course of this year with my collaborators. But before that, I do want to touch on a little bit of something that I just wanted to comment on. Sorry, I'm handling 2 computers. I am my own personal AI assistant. So I wanted to comment on the fact of something that I've noticed about the US. I'm an immigrant from Mexico. And I've noticed that in the United States, a lot of people determine themselves by what they study. That's how they define themselves. And I think that's very interesting. And I don't like defining myself as one thing or the other. In this school, I am known as a manager because I came to work as a stage manager in the drama department. But I think I am more than that. And I think that each person in this room, and I think every single student in this school, is much more than what they're studying. And I think that's a really important reminder, especially as we go through these challenging times, the fact that we are not just defined by what we're doing at the moment. So I'm not just a manager. This is a list of other stuff that I do. And the reason why I wanted to comment on this is because of what I just said, that during these times that challenge us, that challenge our community, that challenge our industries, it is important to see and study ourselves and see what other things we can do and how each one of these things can help us move forward into whatever we're doing. So all the little things that I listed in here are things that I have practiced in the past that have allowed me to do what I did this year. And I don't think that I would have been able to successfully do what I have been able to do this year if I hadn't practiced those other things that I am on top of being a manager. So yeah, anyway, moving on. Pampan's gonna kill me, but this is Pampan Guo. She's an undergraduate student in the drama department. She's an amazing singer and she's a composer. And the reason why I added this slide, please take a screenshot of it, of her Instagram, is because she was one of my closest collaborators this year. She is a sound composer for the two projects that I'm about to talk about. So yeah, she's gonna hit me for this picture. But okay. So moving forward, what is theater? I was taught in the United States that theater was defined as someone who is performing, someone who is listening or observing the performance, and then a shared space. If those three elements connect, then you have theater, and that's how theater was defined. This is gonna be kind of depressing, but I don't think that we can achieve that during these times. I don't think that theater is able to successfully be done during these times, and that's my own personal opinion. I think that we're still sharing stories. I think that that's really important, but theater in itself is not what we're doing. I really believe that, and I think like the theater artist should take a moment to mourn if they need to, and then adapt. One of the amazing things about theater, one of the reasons why I wanted to join the community of theater, was the fact that theater artists adapt. And I encourage everyone in theater to adapt during these times. So storytelling, can theater translate to other mediums? Like I said, I think storytelling can translate to other mediums, but I don't think theater itself can successfully do that just because of what it is. And for those who have experienced theater, for those who have sat in a theater or in a space and share that intimacy with the storytellers, with the performers, you know that it's not the same. Sitting in your living room, watching it through a screen is not the same. It still has its value, but it's not the same. So storytelling, how to tell a story. There's so many different ways to tell a story, and through video, it can be done live. It could be done synchronously. It can be done asynchronously. It could be done as an animation. It could be done as different mediums and whatever. I'm just gonna move on because I'm just rambling at this point. So, oh, here's another important thing about storytelling. This is one of the topics that I immediately when the quarantine happened, I had some weeks to myself to reflect on what storytelling is. The idea of, is storytelling about me, the person telling the story, or is storytelling about the audience, the ones listening? And I think there needs to be a balance about who you are as an artist and what you want to accomplish, but always keeping in mind that storytelling, you're involving other people. You're asking them to give time out of their day to invest in the story that you're telling. So I think it's extremely important that we always respect our audience, that we always respect and take into consideration the people that we have invited into our spaces or into this time to enjoy our stories. So the first story that I want to share is called Suzanne. It was a 5-minute long short film, and it was done in a type of stop motion. So the animated images that you're about to see, there are in about the same speed in which the video has been composed. The music composition was composed by Pam Guo, who I talked about before, and then the actor was Erica Clark, who was an undergraduate student here and just recently graduated. I'm putting this in front of the screen in front of y'all because this was a project that I was doing last year. It was a collaboration between drama, dance, and music students. It was 56 of us that got together to create this production. And sadly, it got canceled 2 weeks before its completion due to COVID. And it was a very devastating time for me because I had spent so much energy and love working and nurturing this team and this story. And the project that I'll be talking about, Suzanne, came from this experience, from me having to mourn such a big project that I had spent 2 years of my life working for. So I just wanted to acknowledge that it came from this. So Suzanne is a trilingual film. It's written and performed in English and Spanish, which are my two main languages. And I have also been practicing more of my German, so I wanted to make sure to include that in here. And a big concept of the story is the fact that whether you understand those three languages, whether you understand two or whether you understand one of the biggest concepts that I want to play with is, why are we so obsessed with understanding? And that's something very common in American entertainment, that our audience always has to understand everything fully. When I believe that one way that we can challenge them to make the experience of watching whatever we're watching more interesting is to provide elements for them to create their own story. So it no longer becomes me telling you a story that you are going to fully understand. It now becomes me giving you the tools for you to create your own story. It's all about visual and oral association. It's all about giving people triggers that they can relate to. So yeah, wenn ich Kunst machen, warum tote ich Teile von mir, means when I create art, why do I kill pieces of myself? And I won't read the rest of it, but that was the main aspect of the story that I created. The fact that as artists, through the process of creation, through the process of sharing, we do lose parts of who we are, and sometimes those parts die, and sometimes that's okay, and sometimes that's detrimental for us as human beings. But I wanted to do an exploration on it. The technical aspects about this project is that I met with my actor, Erica Clark, who was one of the actors from Saki, who I wanted to collaborate for so long with. And we shot a video in one day. I knew all the shots that I wanted to have. And then that video, I divided into frames, printed each one of them, which was about 4,000 prints that I ended up creating. And then individually, each one of them, I worked with either pastels or watercolor, and I ended up creating different compositions, visual compositions with color. The film itself was in black and white, and then whatever I drew on ended up being in color to tell a story. And of course, this one is not loading. And these are just some stills of the final product. If you want to watch the film, it's up on my website, which I'll provide later. So yeah, that was the first project that I did. It took 2.5 months to complete, from me writing the initial concept and contacting fellow artists. The toughest thing was printing and editing all those pictures and then putting them together in a video. That would took so long. And then Pan was able to create the soundtrack from it after spring quarter in 2 weeks. And yeah. So the next one is Symptoma 20. Symptoma 20 is the most recent video work that I created. We've been in the works to create something along these lines, me and my group of friends who were called ourselves Moon Collective. And it was supposed to be a live show, and this one we ended up translating it over the summer into a film to respect all the COVID guidelines and to make sure that everyone was safe. It originally started as Hard Candy and now it's Symptoma. But anyway, so Symptoma, why this story? Why this format and medium? Why this story? Because we felt like during challenging times, I've been reading a lot of philosophy about crisis in history, and during crisis and challenging times, it's important to keep it light and keep it comedic. So we wanted to tell a comedic story that still reflected on what we're all going through this the year. Why this format? Like I said, because we wanted to keep everyone safe and respect the guidelines and make sure that nobody got sick. And how? A lot of work in very little time. Usually film takes months and months to create, and we were able to achieve this in 3 months. This is just some publicity work. So you saw the publicity work is very colorful. This is actually the prologue of the show. It's a 6-minute prologue, I think, shot in black and white, which was more cinematographic. And then as you go into the show, it turns more theatrical. All the people involved in the show, in this production, in this video, are theater artists, and we wanted to make sure that we didn't lose that theatrical essence on it. We're not creating theater, but we're still theater artists creating theatrical work in a different medium, in this case, film. So yeah, this is some of the aesthetic shots of how we shot the prologue and the epilogue. And then this is how the middle ground of the film, which is about 40 minutes long in the middle, ended up looking. And I implemented so many aspects of who I've been as an artist throughout the process. Makeup, lighting, all that, and of course all my collaborators helped so much. Yeah, one of the other concepts that I wanted to play with is addressing the audience, and disappointment. Sometimes when you create art, there's a lot of disappointment depending on expectations, because disappointment is determined by expectations. If you set the expectations with an audience member in a specific place, then they can't be disappointed because you set the expectations where it needs to be. This is just a shot of episode 6. We divided it by episodes, the entire film. And I just wanted to showcase some of the aesthetics of how the show worked. There's a lot of glitching around because we wanted to play with the idea that our days through quarantine have felt like a glitch, especially because we've been spending so much time in front of screens. This is a quote that my friend, who is a art director, who was the art director for the show. I collaborated with her for so many projects. She sent this to me, and I just wanted to put here in the presentation to acknowledge the fact that it is a collaboration. The one thing that I want to take from this quote specifically is the fact that this reality had magic, fear, and confusion. And that's not just the reality that we created in the show when it comes to the colorful parts that you just saw, but also the fact that our reality right now is full of magic and fear and confusion. And we wanted to create a mirror in that sense. This is just another, just to showcase some of the movement that was in the movie. The black and white shots were inserted in certain points of the weird, colorful world, just to remind everyone that this is just a mirror of what we were seeing before. These are just some more shots. The story in itself, it doesn't really have a genre. We wanted to when people sit down at night and they turn on the TV, they either want to watch horror, depending on how they feel, or they want to watch a romantic comedy, whatever. We didn't want to create something like that. We wanted to create something that was funny, that was scary, that was full of suspense, that was enjoyable, because that's our reality. Our reality is not just horror. Our reality is just not comedy. It's an amalgamation of all those things. These are some shots of the movie throughout. I won't read this, but the epilogue had a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful monologue by one of my friends who I've also worked with a lot. Her name is Taylor. And I want to invite everyone to just go watch the movie just to listen to her deliver this monologue at the end of the movie. It is beautiful. One of the things that I wanted to make sure we communicated in the film was the fact that life is not a game, because so many people right now in this moment in our society are taking this entire pandemic as a joke. They're not listening to what the health requirements are. They're not taking care of each other. And one of the messages was to not take life as a game. So yeah. Yay, art. I just want to talk real quick about some of the things that I learned this year through these projects. And that's, do not wait for instructions, because there are none. There are none, so just go for it. There's no instructions, don't wait for them. Don't wait for a leader, because they're busy. Be your own leader. I always say that the best collaborations are when every single person in the team is their own leader and becomes responsible of their art as well as the work of the other people. So do not wait for a leader, be your own. This is so cliche, but fail again. And then find your family and take care of your family. The people that you jive with, the people that your aesthetics work with, or the people that challenge you. Find that family, take care of them. And yeah, so this is just my website. Both of the films can be found there. Symptoma is a 50-long film, and Suzanne is a 5-minute long film. So if you have an extra hour today, go watch those two films. They're complete opposites. And then that's my Instagram in case you want to look at some of my work. And that's it, Vinny. I pass it to you.
Yeah, thank you. Back to gallery view for me. Thank you, Jesus. That was terrific. Laura and Brandye, would you turn your cameras on? I'm really grateful to all three of you for your presentations, and they're all very different, and you're all doing really exciting work. I'm going to jump into some questions. Those of you who are watching from home or driving your car, well, actually don't write if you're driving in your car, but if you're watching from home, pop stuff in the Q&A. I'm going to start. Antoinette asks or says, I'm struck by how both Brandye and Laura's work is hyper-personal, and she's wondering if this quality is something that you see as part of a larger shift in contemporary art away from more impersonal approaches like irony or formalism. Any one of you can jump in there. Laura, your blue button is muted.
Sorry about that. Um, I'm not sure that I see a larger shift in contemporary art. I think there's always been like an undercurrent or an underbelly of people doing really personal work. But things, I don't know, I feel like things cycle in fashion a bit. And I think perhaps while personal work may enjoy a moment of being more acceptable, I think always the like bleeding heart on the sleeve kind of thing is always a risk. And I don't think it's ever going to be, fashionable or super acceptable. Irony is a lot more comfortable to witness. Brandye?
I am, I really see myself as a part of a dance tradition that is that is of a Black experience. I danced with Alvin Ailey, Ailey 2. I then went on to perform Garth Fagan's choreography in The Lion King. And I, I went on to work with Collage Dance Collective, which is a ballet company in Memphis that is focused on providing opportunities for dancers of color. And the works that I have traditionally performed have always been personal, story, narrative based works. And so, to that end, I can't divorce myself from what is personal. I just see that um, I have to continue to use my own voice, which is what I know to do. And if that is not a departure from or a departure from what is current, then that is what it is.
Cool. Thank you. This is a question from Dean Barker, and it's for all three of you, but I'll ask Jesus to go first since he didn't answer in the first question. There's a spiritual aspect to all of your presentations and a deep emotional commitment in each. How do these qualities interact for you? Jesus, go first.
The spiritual aspect of it, and I feel like there's always spirituality when it comes to my work personally, because um, I was raised Catholic in Mexico, and then because I'm a homosexual man, that did not fly there. But throughout my development as an artist, as someone who is spiritual, but the religious institution went against who I am as a person. Um, I feel like my spirituality has been challenged quite a lot. Um, and those aspects of Catholicism are always embedded in my art. Even though the institution of the Catholic institution might reject me because of who I am, a lot of the things that I learned through the training that we go through that institution are still very present in my work. Um, and it's challenging. It's challenging to implement them, but I think it's important because I do believe that every single person is part of something bigger. That we're connected in one way. And if we're telling stories, why not acknowledge the fact that we are all connected and respect the fact that we are all connected? I'm not sure if that answered the question. I get nervous whenever someone asks me anything about spirituality, but um, yeah, I think it's just, yeah, I'm just going to shut up. Brandye and Laura, you have something better to say.
Jump in, one of you, if you want. Nope, nobody has any. Oh, there's Brandye. Okay.
Yeah, I feel that my spirituality absolutely supports um, my emotional connection to my work. I don't think that I could be true to even think about presenting it on a stage without some level of source, of connection to source. And for me, that is God. Um, and I I continue to um, pray for guidance about how I can move forward through this process because it is very emotional. And so just to find the strength um, to keep getting up every day sometimes, let alone create something, requires a deep connection to God for me personally. So that's my answer.
Thank you. Laura, do you have something to add? You're muted again.
Sorry. Um, One, thank you for the question. Thank you for the answers that I got to hear my fellow panelists share. I kind of avoid the S word myself. I mean, I have great respect for faith and a deep respect for the forms of worship. But in fact, I think it's really like makes sense that you tied those two together, the spiritual and the emotional. And I'm wary in that territory because I feel that it's kind of a double-edged sword. I, uh, I try to duck or soft pedal that confluence of those two things, and try to stay focused on squawking about moral and ethical accountability. Like I don't want my emotion to override my feeling of necessity for action.
Fair. That's good. That's a good point. Thank you. I'm going to go right back to Laura with Dean Barker's other question. Do you see your work as a function of mourning?
I feel like I'm going to be talking too much. That's super perceptive. Yes, yes, absolutely. And I should probably drop in there yes, it is a function of mourning, and the primary thing that like drives the work, there's my personal mourning, but there's also what I know about the number of caregivers, again, familial and institutional, in America. Like, I'm really interested in making of my own mourning a vehicle to carry some of the experience of my fellows. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Um, I noticed from all three of your presentations that all three of you are, in as much as I was talking in my introduction about the siloing that I think that the departments tend to be in the school. Each of your presentations specifically is about bursting through those silos, right? Brandye, your piece it's very personal, but you also you talked about visualizing the production. You talked about using video design at the end to sort of create the metaphor of the knee. Um, Laura, you're not only are you pushing your fingers into composition and aspect and singing, but also you're moving right into my field, which is sound design, and using software to sort of create content. And Jesús, all of your work is like there's no silo. Um, it was completely unintentional on my part that all three of you were doing. I had no idea this was going to happen, but I'm wondering if you can speak to your thoughts either on uh, the phrase interdisciplinary work or your relationship to multi-artist collaborations or sort of group work. Anybody can go first. Brandye unmuted first. You win.
I'm going to jump in and just say that I think the more we can build bridges across and through the department and even beyond the department, the larger and stronger I believe our community becomes. And I think that now more than ever, it's important that we have connection to one another and to our community. Um, yeah, we're in a very fractured world. We are experiencing the breakdown of our socio-political framework in this country. We are experiencing clearly a physical separation from one another because of this awful pandemic. And I believe truly that the more we can work together, and the more opportunities that we have to work together and see each other through our creative processes, the better we all become.
I love Brandye's answer. I agree with all that you said. When it comes to creating art, I believe in collaboration. That's why I went to theater, mostly because of the collaborative aspect. I do think that 2, 3, 5, 20 heads think better than one. And I'm all about community. Most of my work is about creating community. That's very important to me. That is very, very important to me because it creates connections between people, and that alone can be healing. Just sharing one space, sharing one's ideas, and not nixing each other's ideas, but just building up and up with each other, I think is a practice on community and becoming a better society, becoming better individuals by ourselves.
Um, so neat to hear like your answers, Jesús and Brandye. Like, it's funny, I'm just beginning to think about collaboration again. I thought that I got into the visual side of fine art because I wanted to be, like in an isolated little cave. Like I really thought that's what I was after. And I was like kind of um, spooked at the thought of collaboration. Like I wouldn't be able to measure up to whomever I might have the opportunity to, whatever. And then I realized that actually collaboration is actually part of my DNA, coming from a background of like playing music. I'm like, oh, duh. Like my first creative endeavors were entirely dependent on a collaborative relation. It's like, oh, I do know how to collaborate. I can. So, I'm still just thinking about that, like as I'm working on this piece of work and thinking about, I definitely want to have people to work with. I'd really love to work with another singer or two. Anyway.
You can go to uci.edu and search for Laura Solomon and find her email address. And if you are a singer, reach out to her. I'm just thinking about what you were saying, and I'm remembering when I was in grad school, I went to grad school for theater, and I was working on a big project, and the director of the play was also the dean of the School of Drama, was also the artistic director of the repertory theater that we were associated with, and he was, a large presence in the room, and on the first day of rehearsal, he looked around at us and he said, I do theater because I think better in groups. And that phrase has made such an impression on me in my work. And I'm really excited to hear each of you express that in a slightly different way using slightly different words. Well, okay. It is 4:30. It is time for everybody to pour yourself a glass of something delicious to celebrate the end of another week. I want to thank Jesús and Laura and Brandye for taking time to prep for this. It's week 9, and I know everybody is full of final projects and other things. So I'm really grateful to the three of you for taking time to do this. I'm grateful to everybody who is watching from home or listening in their car. I know at least one of you is driving and listening. I appreciate all of you taking time to support the students and to also expand yourself and spend some time on a Friday afternoon. This is the last one of these for the quarter. So we'll meet again at the end of January. I'll send out an email about that. But I hope that you all have a safe and happy end of the quarter and holiday season, and we'll see you in 2021. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.